Russia is now being blamed in all crimes without any proof. Let's just take, for example, the attack on the humanitarian aid convoy. We know who hit it. It was one of the terror organizations on the ground. And we clearly know that the Americans are aware of this as well. But they prefer blaming Russia without proof. That's clearly not what can help the situation. This manner of acting at an international level is called pressuring and blackmailing. But with Russia, that has never worked and never will work.
Today is Thursday, October the 13th, 2016, and today I want to talk about Russia and all the hysteria around Russia allegedly interfering with our election here in the United States. I want to talk about our involvement over there in Syria, and I want to talk about the foreign policy as it relates to what Donald Trump is saying that he wants to do and what Hillary Clinton says she wants to do. Now, it's kind of a complicated issue, but at the core of it is very simple. Let's start with the foreign policy issue of Hillary Clinton first. Now, what Hillary Clinton wants to do is to essentially go to war with Russia through proxy in Syria, right? Because Russia is over there right now. What they're doing is they're fighting against ISIS alongside the government of Syria. Syria has invited them to come and help.
But of course, it's not just Russia that's bombing your enemies, it's the United States. Do you welcome American airstrikes against ISIS?
No, because it's not legal. First of all, it's not legal.
It's not legal for Russia to do it, is it?
No, they are invited legally and formally by the Syrian government. It's the right of any government to invite any other country to help in any issue. So they are legal in Syria, while the Americans are not legal with their allies. Of course, all of them are not legal.
What many of you may not know is a geographical thing going on here. Syria is not that far from Russia, actually. You know, if you look at a map, and I'll probably place a map right here on the screen before you, you can see the geographical location of Syria as it relates to Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and also Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, right? You got Syria, and then to the north of Syria, you have Turkey. Now, to the north and to the east of Turkey, you have Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia. Those states are right along the Caucasus Mountains. And to the north of that, that's Russia right there. And the region right there in the Caucasus Mountains is called Chechnya. You got a lot of terrorists that come from Chechnya, you know, Dagestan, all that kind of place. And they go down to Syria to learn jihad, to become terrorists, and then they go back to Russia and engage in terrorist attacks.
The attempts of international terrorism to control large territories in the Middle East and to destabilize the situation in the region draw concerns in many countries. Russia is also concerned about this, especially considering that there are at least 4,000 armed fighters who are now battling the Syrian government and are from the former Soviet republics. Of course, we cannot allow them to gain the experience at war and being ideologically influenced suddenly appear on Russian territory.
And they also go to other places. The Boston bombers were from Chechnya. You know, maybe they went to Syria to get some training. I'm not really sure about their whole background. But the whole point here is that Russia has a problem with terrorism coming from the Middle East because Russia is right there. So, of course, they're going to go into Syria because they got interests just based upon geography and based upon some of their nationals that have fled to Syria and Turkey. So they're going to be there. China is there as well. And they're all fighting against ISIS alongside the government of Syria via the democratically elected government and President Bashar al-Assad. Right. So when I hear in the news, you got Hillary Clinton talking about, oh, Bashar al-Assad is a dictator. He needs to be deposed. I mean, why? So you could turn Syria into a series of statelets, kind of like the same way you did with Libya and Egypt to a certain extent. Definitely Iraq. You did it in Iraq. And I think maybe the goal is to get Syria destabilized and then go to their, you know, close by neighbor past Iraq, which you already pretty much have conquered, and then go into Iran. But see, going into Iran is a very complicated issue. And I think what they want to do is they want to start in Syria first, fighting a proxy war, because Hillary Clinton is all for the no-fly zone. She's all for having military might against people that use electronic means. That's why they're trying to say that Russia is not only engaging in war crimes over there in Syria trying to assist Bashar al-Assad, just like what they said with the whole Aleppo boy, he had the blood on his face. They were trying to say, oh, well, he got bombed by Russia and the Syrian forces. I mean, how do you know who bombed him? How do you know who did that bombing? You don't know. You know, even if you did know, how do we know you telling the truth? I mean, the Clintons are not necessarily pillars of honesty here. They're not pillars of virtue, right? So how do we know they're even telling the truth about who did that? And where's the evidence that shows that the Russians or the Syrians, the actual government of Syria, of the Syrian people, did that? It's just trying to make Russia be this big bad guy so you can have an excuse as to why you would just bomb them in Syria for violating the so-called no-fly zone. That's what it is. That's why I was kind of surprised when you had Mike Pence come out and say tough things against Russia, calling Vladimir Putin a small guy, a bully, and somebody that could be, you know, handled with military might, because that's not what Trump talks about, which is my next point here. Trump is a non-interventionist. Trump is a guy that's more of a nationalist. Now, people hear that and they get triggered. They hear nationalist. Oh, is he a white nationalist? No, he's not. He's an American nationalist. America is no longer a white country. It's a majority white country, yes, but it's not a country that is specifically for white people. At one point in time, it may have been true, but not anymore. You know, it was never true because you had slaves and everything else, but I digress. But the whole point here is that American nationalism should be the forefront of every American's mind rather than globalism, which is what Hillary Clinton wants to promote. Globalism will do nothing but just enable the money people to be able to get more money into their pocket, and it will line the Clinton Crime Foundation with more money, but it won't do anything for the American people in a positive way. I mean, unless you just want to be a slave to the government, they'll give you benefits. They'll give you Obamacare. They'll give you just enough sustenance for you to be able to survive. But what about being able to manifest your own destiny? I mean, is that what you want? Kind of like the Chinese future where the government decides everything for you, where you don't have any personal sovereignty, let alone national sovereignty as a nation where you live, you know, open borders and everything else. But I digress. Let's get back to Trump and his view about foreign policy. Like I said, he wants to be a non-interventionist. He wants to be a nationalist, and he wants to have good relations with Russia, China, etc. You know, he says nice things about Vladimir Putin because he wants to get along with him. I mean, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with wanting to get along with somebody rather than fighting? You know, and why do we need to fight Russia? I mean, what have they done to us? Oh, we say that they annexed Crimea. So what? Crimea is a Russian place, really. Crimea is a place where they all speak Russian and they're ethnically Russian. So what's the big deal? It ain't like they went over to France and took over Paris like the horde of Muslim invaders are doing with the invitation of the European Union government. I'm not going to say Francois Hollande. I'm not going to put that on him. I mean, maybe he has invited them, but I think more of that is coming from the European Union over there in Brussels rather than the country of France itself. But I digress. Whole point here is that there are bigger forces at play that are determining a lot of these things that are happening. And people like Hillary Clinton are simply puppets that they use to promote whatever kind of ideology they want to promote. And Donald Trump is not beholden to these individuals. He's not a puppet. So therefore, he's seen as a threat, right? Hillary Clinton is more of a neoconservative than anything. People want to say that she's not a Democrat. I think that at this point in time, you could put labels on people. You could say she's not a Democrat, she's a neocon, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, like I said in the previous video, a lot of these terms don't even really matter and they don't fit because what she is part of the establishment, and there's only one establishment. It doesn't matter what party you're on, right? If it was a guy like Mitt Romney in there in the Republican Party, even if he said the things that Trump is saying, it really wouldn't matter as long as he told the party line. As long as at the end of the day, he was a company guy, as long as he was a jobber, it wouldn't make a difference, right? The whole thing with Russia is not, it's just overblown because you have the elites, the establishment that want to start stuff over there in Syria. They want to start it right there and create a proxy war because, like I said before, Russia's over there at the behest of the Syrian government, and so is China. So if there's a no-fly zone and then Russia so-called violates it, then that gives the U.S. an excuse to attack. just like what they did over there in Yemen, and they attacked the Houthi rebels, which is in an Iranian controlled area. See, that right there, that's kind of fighting a proxy war. If you're fighting against Iranian controlled assets, that could be considered a fight against the Iranians themselves, which could bait them to go over there and defend those assets that they own or that they have acquired through the U.S. money, most likely because of the Iran nuclear deal. But I digress. If Iran feels a need to protect their assets, then they may go over there and fight. See, it's a proxy war. And the whole thing really is just to enable the elites, just to give them more money, give them more control. So that's pretty much all I got to say about it. You know, Russia, I say leave Russia alone. What have they really done to us? We don't have any beef with Russia. Let's not start a Cold War again, because Russia is nuclear capable. So is China. So is Iran. They say Iran does not have nukes, but yes, they do. Even if they don't have nukes on their actual soil, they can get nukes. They can get nukes from Pakistan. They can get nukes from China. They can get nukes from wherever they need to get them from. And Iran has a location that's kind of right there by Russia. I mean, you got the Persian Sea or whatever, and then to the north and to the west, you have Georgia, Azerbaijan, etc. And then to the north of that, you get the Caucasus Mountains, which is where Russia starts, to the south. So geographically, they're kind of aligned with Russia and China and the Middle East. So at the end of it, if somebody attacks Syria and you attack Iranian controlled assets, Chinese controlled assets, and Russian controlled assets, that right there, that's a world war that the U.S. cannot win. Someone will win in that war, and that would be the elite, the establishment who get paid off of that, who can print the money to fund the war on all sides of it, you know. And then if there's a nuclear holocaust or there's a fallout, when the world restructures itself, when the world comes back, are there going to be any more states? Are there going to be any more nations? Are there going to be any? Is there going to be any more sovereignty? Any more of your own sovereign currency? I think not. I think it'll be one world government. I think that is the end goal here. And Trump said in the speech, which I will link to in the box below, that the goal of the Clinton Crown Foundation and other elites is to establish a one world government, to have globalism. So this whole thing with Russia is really just a ruse. It's a wool over the American people's eyes to try and institute the one world government. So that's pretty much all I got to say for it. What do you think? Do you think that we should get into war with Russia? Now I ask you why. I mean, what business do we have fighting Russia or China or Iran for that matter, or in Syria? I mean, have we been invited? I'm not quite sure if we've been invited to Syria. I know Russia has, but I'm not quite sure about us. I don't think so. So why are we over there? If they didn't invite us, then why are we over there? And if we're over there, who are we fighting? Are we fighting the actual terrorists, which is ISIS? Are we fighting the Russians who are fighting the terrorists? Are we fighting the Syrians who are fighting the terrorists? Or are we just over there trying to manage our own interests? And if that's the case, then what are we doing? Does that help Americans, or does that help other people who have greater interests than those that will benefit the American people? Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.
It's now Hillary Clinton who wants to start an air war with Russia over Syria by calling for a no-fly zone. We have 2,000 nuclear missiles on hair-trigger alert, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the former premier of the Soviet Union, is saying we are closer to a nuclear war than we have ever been. Under Hillary Clinton, we could slide into nuclear war very quickly from her declared policy in Syria. So I won't sleep well at night if Donald Trump is elected, but I sure won't sleep well at night if Hillary Clinton is elected. Fortunately, we have another choice other than these two candidates who are both promoting lethal policies. But on the issue of war and nuclear weapons and the potential for nuclear war, it's actually Hillary's policies, which are much scarier than Donald Trump, who does not want to go to war with Russia. He wants to seek modes of working together, which is the route that we need to follow.